In this video, we're going to go through the 2023 updates to the FieldHub Flow Engine. The FieldHub Flow Engine allows teams to track workflows, processes around work orders, accounts, sites, proposals, and other objects that are tracked inside of FieldHub. We're going to start by creating a new flow and go through the entire process. We're going to specify the phases that are part of the fire alarm permit flow. We're going to choose what objects in FieldHub we can attach this flow to. In this particular example, we want to track fire alarm permits as a part of work orders. Our flow now shows the basic information about the flow and the phases. We can easily change the order of the phases by clicking on one of the handlebars and moving the phases up and down into the correct order. We can edit each of these phases and provide some additional detailed information, including a description if we want it primarily for documentation purposes. We can choose who to auto-assign this to when it enters this phase. We can choose a color, specify whether this is an endpoint. In this case, this is not an endpoint, and we can include some checklists, which we'll do on the next phase. This will be an approval process, and we can specify that approval is required and that it's required before it can be moved to the next phase. We're going to assign it to Andy, who's responsible for approving submittal packages before it's sent to the AHJ. Now, once it's submitted to the AHJ, it could be approved, but it could also be rejected. So we're going to choose both of these next allowed phases. When an item is approved, we don't want it to go to rejected as the next phase, so we're going to choose to skip ahead to QA. When it's rejected, we're not going to go to QA. We can go back to preparing submittals, reviewing submittals, or submit it to the AHJ. And we can specify who we want to be notified by default and who's going to be responsible for dealing with rejected permits. We can even add reasons for why it was rejected. This checklist is not going to have required items since these are multi-check. The user can select one, multiple, or none of these before moving it to the next phase. From the QA phase, they can move it to complete. And we're going to add some additional QA items that we want to make sure are completed before this permit process is wrapped up. This can be file Bonnie is going to be responsible for this part of the process. From here, it will be moved to complete. If we wanted to have multiple endpoints, multiple phases where the job would be considered complete, we can go in and we can specify all of the ones that might be considered completed. In this case, we're not going to do that. Now that we've created the flow, we can go to our project. We have a work order. We'll go ahead and add this flow to the work order. Start a new flow. Specify that this is the fire alarm permit flow. It's going to automatically assign to the person we indicated. We can optionally choose a next action date. We'll just set it for tomorrow so that it can be acknowledged tomorrow by the assignee. It's assigned to Don by default. It has a next action date of tomorrow. Don's going to receive an email notification. When Don clicks on it, it's going to take Don to this page. Don can then say preparing submittals, and Don can specify the date for the next action to be completed, so the date at which the submittal preparation will be completed. If somebody else was responsible for assigning this to Don, they could also specify this date. Now Don has to check off these items before it can be moved to the next phase. He clicks on it, it's going to indicate that the checklist is incomplete, and we need to complete these required items. Required items are indicated with a star. Once the required items are indicated, Don might also go ahead and add some other descriptive text. It's going to specify who did what when. We're going to move it to the next phase. This information can be tracked on this column-based phase board. Here, we're going to go to the fire alarm permit board that we were working on, and we can see that at this point, we only have one project. I can click to see the details. We can specify that this has an internal approval. It's going to mark who approved it at what time. And now that it's turned green, we can move it to the AHJ. It's going to count the number of days that this particular flow is in this particular phase. And this allows us to very quickly see how many days each item. We can from here set the next due date. We can also go back to the work order or to the account and see all of the flows that are associated with that work order or that account. So here we can see associated with the account all of the flows, even though they're for multiple different work orders. Here is the fire alarm permit flow that we created. And from here, we can change who it's assigned to. We can change the status and say that this was approved. And we can change the next action date and say that the next action needs to be completed by this date. As dates approach, they will turn yellow. On the date it's due, it'll be green. And if it is overdue, it will turn red. Now we've completed this flow. We can specify that these checklist items have been completed, and we'll move it to complete. Once it's complete, we can see that on the flow, it moves to done, and it can be found under the Done tab. Thank you for taking the time to review this. Please email or contact us with any questions or to set up a more detailed demo.